Well, hello everyone. Hopefully this is working for you. If you guys could just give me a thumbs up or something in the comments so that I know things are going well here, because there's no chat feature here, so I'm kind of just flying solo. Hope things are well with you while I wait to see if things are working here. Um, it's been interesting, that's for sure. I don't really have anything new to update you with in terms of things I've been hearing from school administration. I've just kind of gotten the gist of, it's a stressful condition for everybody. And not to overload you guys with work, which you heard from me before we did this whole hiatus, I guess. Um, we were told, not to overwhelm you guys and not to assign anything and grade anything. And I don't intend on doing that. I'm not looking to skirt the rules or anything like that. But I don't know if you saw the tweet from College Board yesterday. They still intend on giving the exam. They're talking about like a home option, or I even heard rumors of maybe an option of 2 weeks down the road. I mean, the thing is that it's flat out too early to say what that's going to look like. So we're gonna hold. We're in a world now where we like quick answers. We don't have patience, but this situation requires patience, and it requires just to take a deep breath and to relax. But what I can tell you, and I don't think I've made this clear, is that you will not be quizzed on any of the chapters that I have assigned you. There will be no official quizzes. It's not like the day that we get back, whenever that may be, that I will say, okay, by the way, here's your quizzes on this chapter and that chapter and the next chapter. It's just going to be figuring out how do we move on in spite of this setback. So keep up with the reading as best you can. I don't know what the situations are like for your families. I don't know how stressed you personally are or aren't. Some of you may just be like, dude, I'm bored, give me work. Some of you may be like, don't give me work, I've got enough going on. Some of you may just be like, I don't feel like working right now. And frankly, there's a lot of different realities for people. So I kind of have to adjust and figure my way through that. So, getting that stuff out of the way, some of you did comment in the discussion board on Schoology with questions that you had. And then again, I did put a little note over in the chat feature that asks you to drop any questions that you have there, because I only intend on doing this for as long as there's going to be questions here. The podcast for chapter 34, I think, was episode 30. I'm not going to check my computer, but it's the Inner Warriors one. And then when you get to chapter 35, just so that you're clear, and I said this in class, but it's episode 30 again, because my old book used to do these two chapters, that is 34 and 35, in one, and now it's split into two. So you'll just be doing that same episode again for the next chapter. So to start here, the common question that I've received so far from folks has been the differences between fascism, socialism, and communism. So keep this pretty brief for you, hopefully. But what we've seen so far in class, when we talked about the Industrial Revolution, we saw Marxist communism emerge. And so the thing I emphasized to you then, and the thing I'll emphasize to you again now, is that when it was Marx and Engels writing the Communist Manifesto, it's a theory, it's an idea, it's nothing more than that. Marx believes that the crisis of capitalism is going to be in overproduction, and there's not going to be enough people willing to buy things anymore, and that's going to lead to economic problems, which then is going to result in a violent revolution by the working classes. And eventually that would result in communism, which would be a situation in which the workers seize the means of production and control the means of production for the benefit of all. In communism, under Marx, to be clear, so I'm going back a while right now, under Marx, in communism, the need for a central state goes away. But prior to that, you have this middle transition between capitalism and communism, which would have been socialism, where there still is a state, and the function of the state is to ensure the transition from capitalism to communism is as smooth as possible. He would argue that people wouldn't be prepared on how to think and behave and act differently in the situation, and that's where the state would step in and kind of help facilitate that. So that's the old Marxist way of looking at things. So let's start with the Soviet Union and with what they're calling communism, because when Lenin takes over in the Russian Revolution, he claims that the Soviet Union, that the Bolshevik Party is a dictatorship, but Marx used to say it was going to be a dictatorship of the proletariat, of the working class. And Lenin says it's still a dictatorship, but it's a dictatorship of the party, as in the Bolshevik Party. It's an educated elite who can help these working classes make this transition out of Russian society, Russian economic society. I guess we'll call it early rudimentary capitalism, moving in through this socialist phase and then into communism. But what communism is at this point is not the same thing that Marx spoke of word for word. Is it a reasonable interpretation given the situation in the Soviet Union? Yeah, you could probably say that. But the whole thing is from Marx to Lenin to especially Stalin, the need for a state to manage society only strengthens. Lenin is all about the dictatorship of the party, and then with Stalin, Stalin is the state. It is all about his power and his rule and his authority. So the goal then, as would be stated in Soviet propaganda and by the state, would be to ensure that everyone in society has the necessities they need to live a secured life. And I think that's fair to say of both Leninist society and Stalinist society. And again, as I say that, I'm talking about what the party line is. Because you could look at war communism and you could be like, well, those people didn't want to give up their grain. That's why they hid it from the state and never turned it over. And in collectivization, those people didn't want to give up their land, and that's why they fought against the state. And then the state demonizes them. So the state would make this whole argument of you're an enemy because you're not cooperating with what's in the best interest of everybody. We want to make sure everybody has a chance here to be economically prosperous, or economically stable is probably the better way to say it. So communism, the goal of it is to ensure stability for all, ensure that everyone has what they need to get by in life. That transcends ethnic origins, that transcends cultural backgrounds. You're going to see communism emerge as what's called a transnational movement, meaning it transcends national boundaries. So hopefully that makes sense for what communism is. Now, your question might be, okay, but how then is that different from fascism? So let's first start by saying this. Fascism, as in like the fascism of Hitler and the fascism of Mussolini, can look and behave really similarly to the totalitarian communist state of Stalin. And that's true. I think they do look a lot alike. You have guys in uniforms, highly militarized, parades, secret police, propaganda, all that kind of stuff. But they believe very different things. So we have like the political spectrum in America. Now I'm doing this on the computer, so I don't know what right or what left is looking at you, but go with it. On my right now, you would have like the Republican Party in the United States, the conservative movement, right? And then on the left, again, my left, I don't think that's right for you guys, but just go with it. On the other side, on the left, would be the Democratic Party. So if we go to the far left of the political spectrum, we have communism. And if you go to the far right of the political spectrum, you have fascism. On those far political sides, the governments behave very similarly, though they desire different things. So I've established what they want on the far left with communism, but with fascism, it is an extremist sense in terms of nationalism. It's an ethnic sense of nationalism. Mussolini is very much about the Italians and elevating Italy back to a point where it's reached the glory days of the old Roman Empire. Everything that everyone does in Italian society is meant to benefit the state. Now, that's different from Stalin or from Lenin, because everything they would say is meant to benefit the individual. Everything being done in fascist society is done to benefit the state. And then for Hitler, it's the same thing. Everything being done is to benefit the German state. So there are still private businesses in Nazi Germany. There are still private businesses in fascist Italy. It's just that Hitler and Mussolini want to make sure those businesses, above all else, serve the interests of the state. So a lot of them will be co opted to make sure they're helping the country remilitarize or rearm itself. Whereas in the Soviet Union, all industries that are governed or all industries that are existing in the state are controlled by the state. There is no capitalism, there is no sense in private property, and everything there is being done to preserve the best interests of everyone in society, not just the state. So then what you have in a fascist state is you're going to have that intolerance for ethnic minorities. You see it very easily in Nazi Germany. And to be clear, it's not just with the Jews, it is with Eastern Europeans, it is with gypsies, it is with even Catholics to an extent, if they're practicing and speaking out against the Nazis. And then with the Italians, it's not as prominent, but there's certainly an arrogance and a superior belief with the Italians here. Daniel, is there a consistent pattern in fascist nations embracing of capitalist markets? I mean, from everything that I've ever seen, I think that they see it as being the most economically efficient. Like, if you really get into the nuts and bolts of Nazi Germany, they're not bright. Um, they're not coherent in terms of like, we have an idea. We want this ethnically superior state, but as far as like how do you go about getting to that, it's really haphazard and it's really figure it out as you go along. Let people compete. Let people fight over it. And so, from everything that I've seen, capitalism seems to be the embrace there because it's just what's been there and it's the easiest way the state can move on with its goals, and then everything else can kind of just fall in line and serve the state as it needs it to. So I think I would say yeah to that. Jason, that's a good question. How does the Great Depression change the relationship between the government and its citizens? um, uh, Globally speaking, it allows for people to accept government intervention into their personal lives. In they can take it with a lot more understanding. A case in point with like the United States, you have the Herbert Hoover administration, which kind of adopts this policy in the early years of the Depression. Like, well, the American way is to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just to carry on and figure out a way personally through this difficult time, and we'll figure it out. That's always been the American way. It's all about, the phrase, maybe you even heard it in eighth grade, rugged individualism was the way that we would get things done. And then what you end up seeing with the FDR administration is all the New Deal programs. The government does step in and says, we need to take a more active role in especially the economic health of the nation, so that people have jobs, so that people have disposable income that can help kickstart this economy. Um, and it's like the U.S. is kind of the light edition of that, because in Western Europe, even in like Britain, you have the welfare state emerging with the policies of John Maynard Keynes. And then, I mean, of course, you have the fascist states and the communist states springing up throughout other parts of Europe. So it only really does intensify there, and it just keeps kind of moving in that direction. You'll see it continue to move in that direction as you get into World War II, as you get into the post-war situation. The relationship between the state and the individual just continues to grow closer and closer. So, Simran, you may have covered this, but what is the difference in helping the state like fascism versus the individual? Simran, I don't think that it is necessarily any different. I think that because if you look at Stalin, he's going to say, everyone's going to get a job, everyone's going to be provided with the necessities of life. Well, Why are you being provided with a job right now? What's the big goal here? It's to industrialize the Soviet Union. It is to strengthen the state. It is to strengthen the nation. And I guess then with fascism, I think I was saying everything is being done to strengthen the state, and that's true, but the state is the nation, so it's meant to strengthen the nation in and of itself. Whereas, don't forget this: the Soviet Union is not a nation state. It is in, they wouldn't use the term, but it's multi-ethnic. It's an empire. Let's be honest here. Um, it's predominantly Russian, but you have a whole host of now independent Eastern European countries that would have fallen under the Soviet Union. So it's not one nation of people. Whereas for the Germans, it's Germany. It's the German nation that you're looking to improve. Simran, I don't think at the end of the day, it's not that big of a difference in terms of what's the difference between helping the state versus the individual person, because I think it's just semantics for the Soviet Union. By helping the individual person, you're helping the state, because the whole goal there with Stalin's 5-year plans is to industrialize, is to bring them into a point where they are self-sufficient. They are a power on par with, especially the United States by that point in time. And did the Great Depression contribute at all to fascism or communism? Aditi, absolutely. I mean, it's hand in hand. Um, if you look back, especially at Germany, they had the crisis of hyperinflation where bread's costing you like 320 million or 320 billion Reichsmarks or whatever, and it looks like the economy is going to fall through the floor in like 1922, 23, and it stabilizes. They get rid of that old currency. The economy starts to steady itself. Jobs start to grow throughout Germany, and this is in 1923. And the political situation seems to level off a bit. And then 1929 hits the crash on Wall Street, and that's really where you see Nazi Party membership start to grow. That's really where you start to see that movement start to gain steam in Germany, because then by 1933, that's when you have Hitler taking charge. As far as communism growing because of the Great Depression, I don't think that there's any states that are adopting communism because of the Great Depression, but I think it strengthens the argument of communists worldwide to say, look at the flaws of the capitalist system, look at what it's done to the world, look at the state that we're in. Um, so when you get to maybe like the post World War II situation, you have nationalists, and when I say nationalists, I mean non-Western nationalists, people who want independence from their empires, saying, look at the situation that we've had for the past 20 years. It's been born of this economic nightmare that turned into a global war. Maybe communism is an option. So I can't think of states that are adopting communism as a result of the Great Depression, but I think it certainly strengthens its sway among individuals who will start to grow in terms of power um, in the post World War II situation. But as far as like what I would say is the greatest thing that helps grow support of communism in this time period is actually the Treaty of Versailles. Um, Names that we'll be talking about really soon, and I think I mentioned the book. It's called The Wilsonian Moment. It's about all these non-Western states that look to the Treaty of Versailles and the Paris Peace Conference as this opportunity. Maybe we can get self-determination. Maybe the Western liberal order will help bring us our independence. And we saw that didn't end up happening. And guys like Mao will say like, oh man, I really like that Woodrow Wilson guy and his ideas. It's too bad it didn't happen. And he'll pivot to turning to Lenin. Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam is kind of one and the same, where he looks to the West as being like this potential beacon of freedom and liberty, and he feels abandoned by them too, and turns to communism as a potential option here. So, yeah, Great Depression certainly plays a part in it, more so for fascism in the immediate sense, but then in the longer term, it doesn't hurt the case for communists around the world. Meredith, were communists like Stalin also nationalists? So Stalin's from the Republic of Georgia. I think Meredith, actually, you and I talked about that the other day. Um, I mean, there's definitely in the Soviet Union a sense of Russian superiority. And if you were to go into like the gulags of Stalin and in those times, a lot of the prisoners that would have been in there would have been national or ethnic minorities. Like a lot of Polish people were thrown into the gulags during this time for political crimes or things of that sort. So to for me to say that nationalism plays no part in the Soviet Union is definitely not true at all. I think the official word of the Soviet Union would be like, no, we don't see, a difference in terms of nationality, and this is an internationalist movement, and we want to allow the working classes of the world to revolt. But then there's definitely an undercurrent of nationalistic tensions between some of those different Soviet republics. So I think it does play a role. I mean, I don't think it's something that like you guys need to like necessarily like worry about, but if you're just like kind of curious, like, come on, is nationalism really not a factor there? No, it plays a little bit of a role for sure. Next question was this Aryan belief that Hitler and other not was. Oh boy, that's a long question. I could recommend some things that you got time to figure it out. Um, Let me keep it short here for you. So basically, Hitler's mindset is World War One, Treaty of Versailles is signed, and a lot of Germans feel like they were thrown down the river by people who support the democratic government, and that was staffed with a lot of people who were Jewish. And then there are communist movements emerging in Germany during this time that are also led by a lot of Jewish people. And so Hitler has it in his mind, as well as some other members of the early Nazis, that there is a worldwide Jewish conspiracy. They believe that the Jews are infiltrating national borders and using these globalist movements like Bolshevism or communism, um, what's another one that I could think of? Well, and the Freemasonry we talked about a little bit. But they just think that what the Jews are trying to do is use these international movements to undermine nationalist states. And they're thus weakening Hitler's idea of this Aryan race. So, and I know that you had even mentioned in class, Meredith, the Aryan race. Well, that dates back to like this Indo-European group who, like, yeah, we know the Aryans as a group that moved into India, but really, they're this Central Asian group that kind of migrated throughout Afro-Eurasia, or throughout Eurasia, I should say. And so they think that the Aryans were the initial inhabitants of the land that became known as Germany. And Hitler would say, like, in the medieval land that is Germany, that's when you had the Aryans, that's when you had a lack of racial integration. And therefore, that's when you had the German state at its strongest and most successful because it wasn't weakened by other races of people. Um, and so he sees the Jews as being part of the conspiracy that is meant to further weaken Germany. And then he looks at the Treaty of Versailles like there's the evidence of this conspiracy that he has in his mind. So that's kind of the short of it. I mean, there's a lot more, and I'll try to find something for you. I mean, there's a book I could recommend, but it's pretty heavy. Um, but I'll see if I can find some things that kind of maybe get to the heart of like where did Nazi ideology kind of emerge from. But hopefully that kind of got you a little bit started on it. How exactly did fascism come about to start? Yeah, fascism starts in Italy. Mussolini is a socialist at the end of World War One. Again, Paris Peace Conference, disillusionment with it. It is such a turning point in the 20th century. Um, the Italians, if you remember, during World War One, sat on the fence for a couple of years, wasn't sure whether they're going to join the Triple Alliance or the Triple Entente, and they felt like they got the better promises from the Triple Entente. So they ended up joining, and after the war ended, they felt that they had made some sacrifices, and there were some really intense battles in the Italian front, like in the Alps, where there was a lot of sacrificing going on, and the Italians thought they'd be compensated from more territory than what they ended up getting. So there's frustration, there's disillusionment with that, and Mussolini also has the advantage of seeing how did things play out in the Soviet Union with the socialist or communist revolution, and at that time, I mean, you're looking at the famines that are coming as a result of the civil war in Russia and a whole bunch of other anxieties about I have these businesses, I have this livelihood that could all go to nothing if the communists take control, if the socialists take control. And I think Mussolini just realizes he's an opportunist and realizes that this opportunity of national identity, to seize upon that and to utilize that to strengthen Italian self belief, and then strengthen his power using that self belief of Italian nationalism. I think he really just kind of folds that up into his pocket and takes full advantage of nationalism. Yeah, then as far as Hitler's anti-Semitism, like I said, I think a lot of it's born out of World War I. Oh, I know a video that I can recommend to you guys now. It just popped in my mind. There's a video that I watched. It is on Daily Motion, and I'll recommend it to you guys. It's older, like early 1990s, but it's from the BBC. I can't remember its name, but I'll have it as soon as this is done. It talked about like Hitler, even like when he was in school, like kind of getting fed a lot of lies and information about kind of like Jewish conspiracies, and they're undermining yes, Jason, you can go. Just make sure you sign out in the back of the classroom. um, there's he's being fed a lot of that information from his childhood. Um, but I think it's a lot of just it's a desperate situation in Germany after the war, and they're searching for answers to these problems. And Hitler kind of finds it all come together in this Jewish conspiracy that he's kind of had lingering in the back of his mind for a long time. But so it's some short term and long term things there. But I know like I've heard things like, oh well, he wanted to go to art school and he did, um, but he wasn't approved, and the person in charge of the art school was Jewish or something. And I don't know if there's truth to that. I've never heard anything really solid on that, but it's kind of a combination of some of those factors, both from his younger days, but I think more so from the post war situation. Um, Would the Great Depression still have happened if World War One never did? Was the economic dynamic of Europe after World War essential? Daniel, I think that there's a big part to World War One having to have happened, because it gets the U.S. economy on the right track. It gets it booming a good bit. You have people who have sacrificed a lot during the war, who are kind of riding this wave of optimism that comes after the war, and it tends to allow them to play a little bit more fast and loose with their savings, or with their money that they're getting from these speculative loans that they're getting from banks. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard to play that kind of like historical game of those potential narratives. Like, what if this never happened? I mean, the fact is that it did happen, and it was definitely central to the depression emerging as it did. Carol, fascist Italy, Nazi Germany had strong government control, but this wasn't the case in the Soviet Union. Oh no, for sure, the Soviet Union has absolutely strong government control as well. Like I stated before, with Marxist communism, Marx's intent is just to say, after a while, the need for a central state is going to go away. Um, but with Stalin, the state never goes away. The state, again, looks very similar to those of Hitler and Mussolini, but they're just claiming to be serving different purposes. So, Carol, to answer your question really directly, the Soviet Union has strong government control for sure. Fascism, Andrea. If you weren't here for the beginning, check it out at the beginning. If my explanation wasn't good enough, I'm not sure that anything that I would add here would help you, but I can certainly I'll have a list of links I think that I'll post in both discussion boards. I'll post that video about the Germans, and it's like a multi-part documentary. Watch whatever part you want. It's pretty wild though, because some of the things that people say, like, you just can't believe that some people like in the 1980s and stuff were still, I wouldn't say Hitler fanatics, but certainly would look back to the days of the Nazis as being like, oh, those were the good old days. We kind of lost our way since then. It's worth checking out. But Andrea, to answer your question, if you missed the beginning of the video, watch the beginning. It was one of the first questions I answered. If you did watch it, I don't think I'm going to do a better job explaining it. So I'll post a link in the discussion board that'll help you out. And DT, do you think something like the Great Depression or a recession could happen since the economy is not doing well? Are there some of the same factors now as there were then? Um, yeah, I mean, I think that there's some things to be concerned about in terms of the economy and the way that things are moving right now. But I think we have the benefit of a lot of people who have learned those lessons and learned those lessons very intimately. I think there are a lot of regulations on the economy that were not in place in the 1920s. So I think that there are definitely some fail safes in place to prevent that from happening. But recessions. I mean, yeah, like we had one 10 years ago, 11 years ago. There's always a potential for it. Um, but I think to also play that game of like, well, it happened back then. How much could it potentially happen right now? That's a difficult thing to do. I think the best thing that can come forth from what we're currently studying right now is this understanding that yes, these things happen, and it led to a lot of catastrophe, but lessons were learned from it and then were applied, and they're still in place in many ways today. Some things did roll back and some things we are sliding back into, but I think that there's enough things in place to prevent something like that from happening. But I mean, it's certainly an uncertain time. That's one thing that's for sure. But I'm pretty confident that we would not see something like the 1920s or the Great Depression again, just because of what's already been put in place. And Carol, did the Soviet Union become communist directly after the Bolshevik Revolution? Yeah, so right after the Bolsheviks take charge in the October Revolution in 1917, Russia enters the state of civil war for about 4 years between the Bolsheviks, so those are the communists, and the Mensheviks, who are basically anyone who doesn't support the Bolsheviks. So it's kind of like this coalition fighting against the Bolsheviks, and it lasts for 4 years. It's ugly. It's violent. It's desperate. There's famines that result from it. It's a pretty awful economic situation, and millions of people will die in it as a result. But by about 1921, that's wrapped up, and the Civil War comes to an end, and then the Bolsheviks take full power. They establish the Soviet Union, and from that point forward, they become known as the communists. So yeah, they do take charge, but then there's the Civil War that lasts a few years before they have full established power. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any more questions below. I can take a moment to answer those too. Well, I mean, and as we wind things down, because I can see questions are kind of slowing up, but I still see a good bit of you in here. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. Hopefully you found this helpful. It's kind of a nice distraction, actually, for a half an hour just to talk. I'm hoping word from the district is that they're going to look to something called Zoom, which is like an online meeting type thing, which, yes, you still see me talking, but then I could still talk with you and you guys could mute your screens and we can maybe have a little bit of a conversation back and forth. Because it'd be nice to have that interaction. You know me, I'm not one to do all this talking in class. Not that I mind it, but there's just kind of other things I prefer to do. I like hearing from you guys just as much. So two more quick questions. How did fascism and communism affect the rest of the world immediately? DT, I mean, I think we're going to see that play out. That's going to be World War II, to be quite honest. So fascism affecting the rest of the world, there's World War II. Communism and the struggle between capitalism and communism, there's the Cold War. So to answer your question kind of quickly here, to be continued as we get into chapter 35. You'll see fascism and communism starting to compete for people's interests globally, and then 36 you'll really start to see it spill out then into the Second World War. Hitler abandoned the fight for Britain and turned toward Russia. Carol, that one we will definitely talk about when we get into chapter 36. That's a World War II question. So right now, remember, we're just kind of launching into the emergence of these states. There's nothing yet. You don't need to worry at all about anything towards World War II. I'd say a good cutoff year for you for this chapter is 1935 or 6. You have the 5-year plans of the Soviet Union kind of taking root, and then the Nuremberg laws, which come about in 35. Kristallnacht, there you go, 1938. Kristallnacht would be like the last thing. So you really see like anti-Semitism ramping up in Germany. But this whole chapter, to be clear, domestic policy. This whole chapter is about domestic policy. What are countries doing inside of their own borders? When you hit chapter 37, that's where we'll start to talk about foreign policy of both the Germans and the Soviet Union. Okay. A little bit confused at the time of the Russian Civil War. Did the Tsar abdicate? Then a civil war? Yeah, Daniel, here's the quick timeline for you. February, March 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicates. He tries to turn it over to his brother, Michael Romanov, I think was his name. And his brother's like, I don't want that. Get it away from me. And the provisional government, led by a guy named Alexander Kerensky, takes charge. And I think it was just like the Russian Duma who kind of just stepped in. I think that's where the provisional government comes from. So that's February and March of 1917, because of their whole Gregorian calendar thing. But Kerensky and the provisional government keep Russia in the First World War, which is just creating so much strain on them, economically, politically, and in so many different ways. And it's not popular, and therefore the provisional government's not popular. So then by October, November of 1917, the Bolsheviks are able to kind of co-opt the revolution and take charge of the government by occupying some buildings throughout St. Petersburg. And then Emma, to your question, yeah, that's the hope. Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, for sure. We'll definitely be doing these for other chapters. My thought is that if today's Tuesday, we'll see, either Friday or Monday to do chapter 35. Yeah, I think we'll do chapter 35 either Friday or Monday. I'll see where you guys are at with your schedule. And then we'll do one for 36 by the end of next week. But then who knows where we're going after this. I hope you guys are checking out Fiveable. The woman who runs it, I did like a questionnaire with her with their website the other day, and I left my phone number. She called me and was like, "How can I help you guys out?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." I just told her, make things fun right now. You guys have the work I'm giving you is just like reading and nothing enjoyable. Let's be honest. Um, so I know they're going to be doing like trivia and stuff like that. Daniel, will there be a quiz for the chapter online? Yeah, give me till tomorrow afternoon. I'll probably just transfer the quiz I was actually legitimately going to give you. I'll probably just get it on to Socrative. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it on Socrative, or maybe I'm supposed to PDF of it. I'll probably just do Socrative. It's just going to take me more time to do it. But yeah, stay tuned for that tomorrow. And rather than overwhelming like your stream on Schoology, just keep checking the discussion board. Period 1, get on there, start posting. Let's go. Period 2's all over, and you guys need to say something in there too. But that's where I'll update things. I don't want to overwhelm your feed and start throwing all this stuff in there. I want to just get it into the discussion board. That way you can look on there as you see fit, rather than being like overwhelmed by anything that I'm sending your way. So yeah, and by the way, please tell your friends if they missed this, that this gets saved and they can then go forth and watch it at another time. I think it's the same link too. I don't think I have to change that. But yeah, I will post those videos for Andrea, for you, for fascism, and then for the rest of you guys to see the Nazis. You got time. I mean, it's the best one I've ever seen. It's a little bit older, but it's the best one I've ever seen. So I will send that along here in the next couple of minutes on the discussion board. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you found this useful. I can say bye to my dog here. Hey, buddy. Bye. Say bye. Say bye, everybody. All right. Well, he's tired. Big day of laying around for him. So I will see you guys later. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye.